Welcome, everybody, to the Fantasy Burn Times, the Dynasty Pulse Times, the Undroppables Unveiled. I am Big Boned at FFB. You can find me on Twitter at that handle. With me today is a very special guest. We're going to be talking about quarterbacks leading up to this 2024 rookie draft, where everybody slots in, etc., as well as going over some Devy guys, some guys to grab target in your Devy drafts and Devy trades, as well as what's going to happen in the 2025 rookie draft, who to look for. Kraig Reuth is my guest today, and he's the creative director at RotoHeat.com. How are you doing, Kraig?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on. It's an exciting week here with the draft coming up, and you get to get a lot more information, but also a lot more questions are coming up. So it's a great time to be in the fantasy community.
Absolutely. So basically what we're doing here is I'm doing a 4-part series focusing on each position in skill positions in our dynasty drafts, the rookies coming up. So I had Noah Hills on for running backs. I had Andrew Cooper on for tight ends. You and I are going to be talking about quarterbacks. I should have another special guest to be determined. I'm working out the details right now. Hint, it's Chalk from the Undroppables, my boss here. And we'll be talking about wide receivers, all of these things leading up to the draft on Thursday. And hey, don't forget, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 o'clock Eastern, the Undroppables will be having a live draft event. Everybody on YouTube, content creators popping in and out. So be sure to check in on that and watch our reactions. We've got guys from the Uncovered Chiefs. We've got guys from the Uncovered Raiders, the Jets, the Patriots. We're all going to be watching as our teams are taking guys in the first round and losing our minds getting drunk live on YouTube. So make sure to check that out. Subscribe over at the Undroppables on YouTube. Follow us all on Twitter. Go to the Undroppables on Twitter and do that too. And let's get into it. So, Kraig, where are you right now?
Well, I am located in Wisconsin, which is a pain for me because I'm a Cowboys fan, and for everyone thinking like, oh, bandwagon, this and that. Yeah, it probably was. But my only memories of football are rooting for the Cowboys. It was when I was little, they started going towards that Super Bowl run, where they had 3 and 4 years or whatever it was in the early 90s when I was like 6 or 7. So I don't remember specifically being a Packer fan. My parents raised me to be one, and they say it was a young active rebellion to root for the cool new Cowboys over the local Packers. But I never cared for Brett Favre, which is probably one of the reasons why I ended up not wanting to be a Packer fan. But yeah, since then it's been a pain, of course, to be a Dallas fan. Not that anyone has any sympathy for us. But
no, not at all. It's America's team to hate. So,
yeah.
And fandom goes one of two ways. Either people, they inherit it from their family, or like you said, they go the opposite. They do something else. Yeah. And I wouldn't call the Packers Cowboys specifically a rivalry as such. The Packers have their division rivals. Those are a little bit stronger. The Cowboys have the 49ers and their divisional rivals, and also everybody else. But yeah, the early 90s, dang it. The early 90s were definitely a time to become a Cowboys fan. Troy Aikman coming in, having a terrible rookie season, and then the team building that Jimmy Johnson did, basically creating the nominal draft pick value. And the Cowboys just absolutely dominated because of that data set that they used. Nobody else in the NFL was doing it. Everybody else was going by scouting reports and things like that. They actually, I don't know if created, but they were the first to utilize kind of an analytical approach in the draft and what picks are valued at, and completely blew everybody away. And then free agency was just, there was no salary cap. So it was a wide open, like wild, wild west. They were able to grab Charles Haley and Deion Sanders, and they had the big three. And I've always argued with people that Emmitt Smith is a totally overrated running back. If he didn't have that historic greatest offensive line of all time, he wouldn't have ever eclipsed Barry Sanders. So, Wisconsin, big news today that just dropped: the Scott Fish Bowl announcing Wisconsin as a location for the live draft. What's your fishbowl history?
So I have been in 3, 11, 12, and 13. I think that I applied for 10. They have a history on the site. I know that only goes back so far when you put in your ID and pull up your info. I think I had applied for 10. I don't remember, but 11 was the first one that I got into. And that sort of tracks with when I more got into fantasy football content creation, which would have been in 2020. So, it was right before the pandemic really blew up. It was in February. They were looking for content creators on the IDP side, which is what I mainly do and had an interest in over at RotoHeat. And I was in a Facebook group with them, and I had a couple people reach out to me and say, "Hey, I think you'd like this and want to do this." So I signed up and started off just writing articles, and then we got into some rankings. But then it's continued from there, and I've gotten more involved in the back end of, updating the website, inputting players into the database, all that sort of stuff. So
Fun.
doing more of that technical stuff, as well as, we're trying to adapt as everyone has to try to stay relevant and keep up with the ever-changing atmosphere of fantasy football content creation, which is always going a mile a minute. So, we're tweaking what we do on the site and what we're focusing on, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Are you signed up for the live draft in Wisconsin this year? Is that on the docket for you?
Yeah, when they announced that, I went and updated it all to the website to say, hey, I'd probably go either way, because I think it'd be fun to go. And my son's starting to get into fantasy football, and be good to have him get it sort of experience too. So we'll probably head there either way, but I did sign up to hopefully get into that live draft.
Yeah, I did the San Francisco live draft last year. It was my introduction to the Fishbowl. Met so many great content people, and basically it launched what I've been doing since, for the last year, just creating opportunities to make shows and write and all that stuff, all the stuff that I was doing anyway.
Yep.
But now I have a voice, a forum, a platform, getting paid a little bit. I mean, it's like Scott Fishbowl completely changed everything for me, and I am forever grateful. But not knowing, especially after the first year, not knowing kind of the intricacies of getting repeat invitations, I smashed everything that I could. I retweeted everything that I could. I've continued to get into the Fantasy Cares YouTube chats and things like that. Won a jersey for Christmas.
That's awesome.
Eagles jersey. Sorry, Cowboys fans. And
That's all right.
and then when I filled out my form and it asked what the locations were, and it said, would you attend even if you weren't invited? And I said, absolutely, because my boy Bo McBrayer's there, and Howard Bender's there, and Mace Riney's there, and it's just a good hang. And you get to be around all these great people, network, and all that stuff. It's great. So I'm happy to be back. So when you first got into doing the data entry for RotoHeat, there's kind of a through line through most of my guests. Most people, A, have been involved in the Fishbowl, and B, have kind of a desire to win in fantasy football. We're not casuals. We're degens. You don't just join a work league on ESPN or Yahoo and then put yourself out there in the space to the point where somebody talks to you and then you come on a show. So there are definite similarities. And when I got into analytics, I got in through baseball. And a lot of that was just basically kind of like prospecting, paying attention to the Giants and wanting to see what was coming up. That kind of over the years evolved into football. I got into a deep GM league in baseball. We had rosters of 300 players.
Wow.
And then we started a Yahoo league, 2 quarterback league. That was the first 2 quarterback league that I'd ever played in football. And I just had this desire to get that edge, to win. And no, coming from baseball and the sabermetric background, that all comes from the eye test versus what you see in a data set. And that data set can tell you a whole lot that your eyes can't see. I'm a ball player. I've been a high school coach. I can tell a ball player when I see one. At the major league level, at the NFL level, they're all ball players.
Yep.
But what are those finite things that separates people? And when you start getting into that, content creation follows, and it's basically a desire to be the best in your league. Do you relate to that? And when did you start kind of like trying to look into more than just what you were watching in a game?
Yeah, I do relate to that where, like you said, and that's one of the things that, slight tangent here, I really don't like on social media when you see, and I don't have any specific examples, but it's all out there all the time where people talk about, oh, this guy sucks. And it's like, relative to what's going on in the field, yeah, there's variations of who's good and who's not. But these guys are all in the biggest, best league in the world. They're in the NFL. They made it that far. Yeah, does Mac Jones live up to what we wanted? No. Is he probably a starting quarterback in the NFL? No. Is he still probably one of the best 70 doing what he's doing? Yeah, he's 70, 80, wherever you want to draw that line, like in the world. I mean, so I don't like people ragging on players in that regard. Because
the guys in the UFL
isn't the NFL,
The guys in the UFL and XFL are better than 99% of the humans on the planet. So it's the minutia.
Yeah, and trying to figure that out certainly does, lead yourself into whether you're doing it on your own or you end up wanting to publish it. But you're basically doing the same job when you're trying to win your league, is find that edge wherever you can find it. And you have to have a mix of both. Like, no one out there has the answer by just watching the film or by just using analytics. It's got to be a blend of both. I think the people that do it best use both of them. For me, it really started going down that path when I heard about IDP leagues, and I started getting into those with my buddies because it's like there's this whole other side of the ball that we're just not paying attention to.
Right.
Even mostly, I don't know if it's most leagues, but a lot of leagues even use like returners and special team stuff. You can have that offensive side of it for yardage and touchdowns, but you're missing all that defensive side of the ball, and there's so much going on over there. I really dug that you go back to 2010, which is when I started doing IDP football. It wasn't nearly the amount of people interested in that. Devy was bigger than IDP was back then. And It was just sort of the Wild West. And digging into that really just led me down that path to eventual content creation.
Have you played all 22 over on PFF?
Yes, I have. Yep.
It's so good. Their inaugural season, I had 3 teams. I won 2 of the leagues just because of defense. I'm a defensive guy. I played linebacker in high school. I have a defensive mindset. I build from the defense when I play Madden. If I was an NFL GM, I would build the defensive side first. So I have this like linebacker punch him in the mouth mentality, and half of the team is completely disregarded in fantasy football unless you're talking about the defense special team.
Yeah, which stinks.
That's fine. The deepest league that I'm in right now, I started for a buddy who had complaints about like standard scoring in our home league, etc. He thought that rushing quarterbacks get too much play in PPR because of the 4-point passing, so he wanted 6-point quarterback passing to give guys like Derek Carr and Dak Prescott a bump. Running backs, wide receivers, and wide receivers, receiving backs, and tight ends getting 1 PPR, that kind of eliminates the running back to a certain extent. So he wanted points per carry to be added. There was no defense, so he wanted positional IDPs added. And then we went ahead and kept defensive special teams and kickers because the final frontier in dynasty football is punters. As soon as they can create scoring metrics for punters and start adding those to the rosters, we will be complete. But until then, sleeper, we're waiting. We're waiting on punters. But it's so fun. I just had to fill 3 orphan teams, and in my opinion, in Dynasty, orphan teams are better without just like taking one over, but taking them and doing a dispersal draft. So I threw my team out, and I took the 3 orphans and I created a dispersal draft, and we did like a draft of all of the skill positions. And then last night we had a waiver session for all of the IDP guys. And then tonight is the waiver claims on defense, special teams, and kickers. But it just focuses you more on deep diving, getting into those defensive players. I put a $280 bid on Leonard. I wound up getting Bradley Chubb. Like, I got the guys that I wanted, and it was like it turned out to be a pretty nice wave for me in rebuilding my team. But I know a lot of IDP guys, and those are the guys who are more focused. Like, focusing on IDP can lead to higher focus in other positions too. So real quickly, give me some IDP sleepers for this year.
Oh, holy cow, putting me on the spot.
Who do you like?
On this quarterback stuff here. Sleepers, guys that haven't done much at all. So, you're going to have to see. Drew Sanders is someone that was really talked up a lot for the Broncos, or getting up to the draft, and then he didn't go as high as a lot of people thought. Linebacker / edge for the Broncos. And we know, like, Josie Jewell moved on, so there's a potential opening there, and that team feels like it's really in a rebuild, so they're going to want to be looking at what they're getting out of those younger players. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be this year, but I think it could be, especially if the year goes as a lot of us are expecting it to for Denver, where they're going to get that playing time. And he just showed so much at Arkansas with he's able to get, to the ball carrier, make the tackles. He was fluid that way. He's an amazing athlete, but he could also get to the quarterback. So I'm excited to see him there.
Yes, absolutely.
It's one of them.
And being Jack Sanborn, Robert Spillane. I told you I'm a linebacker guy. Robert Spillane, I absolutely love. I thought the Raiders made a mistake by bringing him over from Pittsburgh, but he was only a part-time player in Pittsburgh. And once he got a starting job in the NFL with the Raiders, he absolutely pick it up here. He absolutely blossomed. I think Robert Spillane is my big sleeper for this year. Okay.
I like it.
We got a thumbs up from Craig Reuth on Robert Spillane. Big train Spillane. All right. So we're going to finish up the fantasy burn portion. Normally it's about an hour. We're going to cut it at 20 minutes. And I'm going to surprise you again, put you on the spot again. We're going to do a power rankings. So you're going to give me your ranks 5 to 1 of something random. It can be movies, movie villains, some kind of foods, your 5 favorite cheese curd brands. That you can either pick a topic if something comes to your mind. We could do your 5 favorite movies just because of the fishbowl theme, 5 favorite villains, 5 favorite heroes, that kind of thing. Or we can spin a random wheel.
I can do movies. I know enough about. I have a good idea of my top movies. So 5 to 1. By the way, what is what are the Wisconsin live draft themes? I got Jack Burton, Big Trouble in Little China. I didn't know the characters from Wisconsin yet.
Okay,
I know what you're talking about, but no, I haven't looked into what the themes are for the Wisconsin live draft.
We'll find out. Okay, Craig Reuth, from 5 to 1. What are your 5 favorite films? We'll just give me the number 5. We'll chat a little bit about it, and then we'll go down to 1.
Number 5, it's a lesser known movie, and it's sort of even lesser known now because you can't buy it anymore because of rights issues over who owns it. But Dogma, it's by Kevin Smith. I think it came out in 1999. It's a commentary on, religion in general, but more specifically the Catholic Church. I was raised Catholic, sort of probably a lapsed Catholic, although it's a lot of Catholics in United States are. But it's just really funny. It has a great cast. Linda Fiorentino, and of course it is Jane Silent Bob in it. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are fallen angels who are trying to get their way back into heaven, and the route that they're going to get there. George Carlin as a cardinal in the Catholic Church is hilarious. He's one of my favorite
Rest in peace.
comedians. Yeah, I got to see him live before he died, which is
Oh,
great things that I got to see growing up. So just a really fun, good movie. And you can actually, the best way to watch it, if you've never heard of it and want to, it is rated R. But you can find a great copy on YouTube. And actually, Kevin Smith, since he doesn't have the rights to the movie, and you can find out why online if you want to. We don't need to get into all that.
right.
But he says the way he watches it is the great copy on YouTube. It's like 1080p,
Yeah.
crystal clear. So
I just watched it a couple weeks ago. Alanis Morissette, Chris Rock.
Yeah. Yep.
The cast is ridiculous, and it's such a good movie. I mean, it has held up over the years. Kevin Smith is great. I love Dogma. Okay, number 4. What's your number 4 movie?
Certainly a bit older, came up before my time, but Ghostbusters, the original one. I like what they've done with the newer ones, sort of trying to bring it in to the newer age with the older cast. But the original, you just can't beat that. Just the whole concept. The visuals look great. It still holds up in its time in regards to that. And just, again, an amazing cast of people that it feels like it's a timeless classic with that blend of sort of sci-fi and comedy.
Yeah, I'm sensing a theme in your films. Each one of them has somebody who's passed away. Rest in peace, Harold Ramis. Ghostbusters is amazing. There's only Zool. I do love the Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Wiig one. I think it's just a really good movie. I haven't seen the newest Paul Rudd one. Have you seen it?
I did. I took my kids, my 3 older kids, to go see it. They really liked it. It wasn't too scary. There's some stuff in there where the youngest that I took to was 5, which is probably too young still, according to the Motion Picture Association. But she had seen the other ones, and it didn't bother her. So we all had a really good time with it.
I am old enough to have seen both of the originals in the theater when they came out. And I don't know if you're like me. There are some people who get song lyrics and movie lines and stuff stuck in their heads, and they become thoughts at different points throughout the day. And for the last 40 years or something, it's constant where something will happen and my brain will go, why am I drippings with goo? And so Ghostbusters definitely iconic. Number 3, what's your number 3 film?
This is a bit newer and sort of a genre change too. It doesn't have any real comedy in it, but it's No Country for Old Men. It wasn't a movie that I had any real expectations going into, other than, again, it has a really nice cast. Tommy Lee Jones, Josh Brolin, Woody Harrelson is in it. Javier Bardem is the main bad guy, of course.
Former football player Tommy Lee Jones.
It was just an amazingly well done movie. It tells a story in a short amount of time. You don't need a big backstory or anything like that. And then the movie just ends. And I know a lot of people hated it because there wasn't closure, but I kind of feel, and this is my big brain, I don't know that they've come out and said this, that's just sort of how life is. At some point it's just going to end. And you, on one side or the other, might not get closure on everything that you want to. And I kind of enjoyed that because you don't get that in movies a whole lot.
I'm a huge Coen Brothers fan. I love the fact that Fargo and No Country for Old Men are both kind of, you could call them polar opposites. They both have a very incredibly creepy kind of villain aspect to it. One is a bumbling villain, the other, and like crap just happens because of him. Yep. And the other is Anton Chigurh, who is a logical villain, just completely removed from his own decision making, which makes it even scarier that you have to deal with him, because it's not his psychopathy that's making the choice to murder you. It's your own taking your fate into your own hands, which is ridiculously scary. I love Kelly MacDonald. She's amazing in everything that she does. The aesthetic is the polar opposite of Fargo. One is like desert wasteland. The other is frozen tundra wasteland. Yep. I love the two as a combination. I like to watch both of them back to back. No Country for Old Men is fantastic. And in the end, everybody dies. Yep. So that's the ending. That's the ending. All right. Number 2. What's your number 2 film?
Movie much before my time, but I still watch it a couple times a year. Jaws. Just the buildup and the storytelling, and that I know it's off of a book. It doesn't follow the book completely, which I think is good. There's some stuff in the book they didn't need to put in there. This will feed into my number one spot too. But just the whole storytelling, the cast is amazing, even despite the issues that they had while filming it and trying to get that movie made. It just ended up being perfect, and probably even better because of some of those issues, like, you know, the shark not cooperating for what they want to do, so they could use it a certain amount. Building that suspense you really don't get in movies anymore. Movies that make you wait for it and make you earn it before you get to those points. And again, you know, it's not a movie really with a happy ending at the end, but it's just a beautifully shot and acted movie.
Yeah, Jaws is total classic. Rewrote the script on what weekend movies were.
Yep.
The original blockbuster. Shout out Steven Spielberg, genius. Jaws is amazing. Craig Reese, number one favorite film is.
It's Jurassic Park, and I mean, it's not even close. If people watch me on Twitter, I'm talking about it and the sequels that have come out all the time. I remember watching it as a kid in the theater, and I remember having nightmares because of certain scenes of what happened in it. It holds up more than 30 years later now from when it came out. Even though they're using CGI, very early CGI mixed with the puppetry and the physical elements, it's just seamless. It's beautiful, and it has something for everyone in it. I know not everyone likes it. Not everyone can like anything in the world. Everyone's got an issue with something, but kids, you can watch it, enjoy. Adults, you can watch it, and it still gives me that sense of wonder of being a kid. Like, oh man, these things were around. Like, imagine what they looked like, and it felt real watching that movie, and still getting that feeling and being able to see that. It's an idea of what it looked like. Of course, it's not completely accurate, but you think it's real when you're sitting there watching it, enjoying it.
Yeah, we speculate now that all those dinosaurs had feathers. So, yep. But 5 bangers, you knocked it out. Those are all great movies, and Steven Spielberg coming up big in your list. All right, we're going to take a break real quick. We're going to come back, and we're going to have the Dynasty Pulse part of the show. Thank you guys for sticking around. We're back with Kraig Reuth. This is part 2 of the unveiled Dynasty Pulse Fantasy Burn 4-parter. It's so convoluted. My brain is just I'm doing too many things at once and just smashing them all together. All right, we're going to get down to the 2024 quarterback rookie class. It's not a real deep class. There, especially when you start talking about first rounders, there aren't a lot of guys that. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that. There are 4 or 5 guys who likely could step in and run an NFL team right away. It's a deeper class than it was last year. It's probably a more talented class than it was a couple years ago. We all know who the consensus number 1 is. That's Caleb Williams. Yeah. What do you think about all of the stuff that's coming out where people are arguing over who the true number 2 in the class is, Drake May or Jaden Daniels? Where do you fall?
It's always interesting how people talk about, a lot of people out there in the Twitter world anyway, but fantasy talk about, your window for dynasty when you're talking about playing dynasty football, or even if you're talking redraft, because that's a shorter window, you're talking about fantasy points. You're not really talking about if you're an NFL GM, who are you going to take and why? Because that's a different conversation, and I think we lose that a lot of the time. For fantasy, we're looking at, hey, who's going to get you the points? Because we know getting points isn't always equated to great NFL play. There's other ways that you can get fantasy points. For fantasy in that short window, to me, I think it's just Jaden Daniels because of that rushing upside that he values or he gives you and the value that brings for having a young quarterback in there. We see that with plenty of quarterbacks. Most recently, whether you believe it's his fault, the coaching staff, whatever, a lot of Justin Fields' points came because of what he could do with his legs, and that made him a viable fantasy player where according to the NFL right now, he's not as valuable as an actual real life quarterback. That remains to be seen, what happens with Pittsburgh. So to me, I think Drake May really does have a chance and probably will be in the league as a plus starter longer than Jaden Daniels. I got some concerns about health and how Jaden Daniels actually plays, that he's going to be able to survive doing that and keep that upside. But they're both really close to me, and it just comes down to short term. If that's how we're looking, I think Jaden Daniels offers you more upside right away because of that rushing.
Okay. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to, for our startup drafts, for our rookie drafts, we're going to start parsing differences. Everybody wants Caleb, period.
Yep.
Without any NFL history to go by, with the fact that he's likely going to go number one, he's going to remain the number one quarterback in rookie drafts probably for the remainder of the season. So, we can just call that a wash. I think landing spot is going to have some effect on Drake May. I think it's going to have some effect on Jaden Daniels. But there is another. Where do you slide J.J. McCarthy in? And I'm basically making a tier 2 of J.J. McCarthy, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May. There are things to like and things to dislike about all three of those guys. Drake May, I don't like his slide. I don't like how he kind of fell off after the first couple of seasons. He was my number one in the class a year and a half ago. After his sophomore year, I was like, there's nobody that's going to pass this guy. Caleb Williams happened to win the job at OSU and then transferred to USC, and the rest is history.
Yep.
Jaden Daniels, he's an older guy. He's right there. I think Bo Nix and Trey Lance are all pretty much the same age. I've been watching Jaden Daniels since he was a freshman at Arizona State, being a Pac-12 fan, and he was too small then. He's grown a little bit. He actually exceeds the 205-pound threshold that we want to see from an NFL quarterback. And then J.J. McCarthy, he's got the knock of not having a whole lot of reps in college, even though he's a winner. He's got a 61-mile-an-hour fastball. He can make every throw on the field. There are things to like about everybody and things to dislike about him. Where do you stand on J.J. McCarthy being included in the Drake May and Jaden Daniels conversation?
I think he definitely deserves to be in there with what you've seen him do over his college career. And like I said, it's not a ton of games compared to some of these other guys. It's not a ton of production. How much of that do you weigh versus what the team needed versus what we want to see out of someone? And, there's always going to be coach speak trying to figure out what Harbaugh's really saying about him when he says, he's the best quarterback that he's ever coached. He had Andrew Luck. Does he really mean that? Is he just talking his player up? I mean, you can sit there and argue that all that you want, but McCarthy has the tools. He has the winning production, and he has the support and confidence of the people that he's played with. To me, that says a lot. I think he can do, and I think he showed, even the game against Alabama, he can make these throws when he has to. Now, did we really see it in multiple games of him having to do that for a full game? No, but you're probably also not asking a rookie quarterback to do all of that all the way. Now, if you are, you're probably setting him up for failure, which depending on where he goes, if he goes to New England, he's probably going to be the third quarterback out of those three. So, my number 4 overall, just because that's a mess for a quarterback to go into, sort of like Justin Fields when he got to Chicago. I think landing spot matters a lot for those three, but I definitely believe he belongs in that conversation, in that second tier 3 guys.
Okay. I'm going to say that Jaden Daniels, because of his rushing upside in a rookie draft in your dynasty league, I think he gets the nod over the other two. I don't think landing spot matters as much as him. He can go to a crappy situation like Chicago, and he can rush his way into your super flex spot, that kind of thing. Give me some sleepers. And because it's such a we're talking about quarterbacks. We're not talking about 30 guys like with wide receivers. Yeah. We're not talking about 20 guys like with running backs. So instead of sleepers, let me know where you are putting your hopes and fantasy dreams on Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Spencer Rattler, and Jordan Travis. How do you What are you looking to do with those guys in your rookie drafts? Say you traded away your first rounder on a competitive team, but you need to re-up your Superflex roster. Where are you targeting those guys? Who are you targeting over? What are you doing with those 4 guys?
So I've sort of seen Michael Penix and Bo Nix group together through a lot of this. If you're talking about mock drafts and stuff so far, when we don't have landing spots and draft capital, which matters a lot to a lot of people, and I think it should be definitely taken into account. I've seen them both sort of in that late first, depending if someone likes them, or more often early second round of these super flex drafts, just because there is so much more of that talent as far as the wide receivers. And then you start having running backs creep up a little bit. And I think you'll have even more of that once we get landing spots. If someone gets good draft capital and goes to a needy team like the Cowboys, for example, I think they're going to start shooting up and probably end up in that late first round. So to me, like you mentioned, age is one thing. All these guys, once you get sort of out of that top group, have pluses and minuses that you can nitpick over. And it's like, what do you want to live with? There's a clear delineation between like Penix, Bo Nix, and I'd even throw Rattler in there and all the guys after him. Speaking on Jordan Travis, the guys sort of like what we talked about with McCarthy to a lesser degree, but Jordan Travis is a winner. I mean, he went out there and did a lot with an FSU team that people didn't expect anything out of. Great character. People love to talk him up. And I think that he will probably be a better athlete at the NFL than a true quarterback. I think he's got more traditional quarterback issues as far as staying in the pocket and making his throws from the pocket, which you're going to have to do that in the NFL if you were to become a long-term backup or a starting quarterback. I think the character that he has and his physical talents will keep him in the league, at least as a backup for a long time, but he's not really in the grouping with those higher 3 for me. You're talking about the order for just the way I have it thrown out there.
Yeah.
If we're taking into account where they're going in drafts right now, I am waiting and taking Spencer Rattler out of the 3 because I think he has overcome so much, and it's his own fault because of how he acted early on in his career when he was like the next great thing. He got put on teams, or he went to teams because he, sort of, what's the term? There's a flash in the pan that burned out, a little bit there. People lost their luster with him, and he had to go actually re-earn trust of players and teams and coaches around him. But since he had that, I think, a freshman year, he's had terrible offensive lines. He's had really bad receiving cores around him, but he's stuck it out. He's still put up numbers, and he became a true leader, which I think says a lot about his character. So I like that because he had the natural talent to begin with any of these guys at the top. He just took a completely different path to get there, and I think people still have a sour taste in their mouth from him. But because of that, you're getting him later in drafts, and I'm liking that.
Viewers of the Dynasty Pulse will know that I am a real big Spencer Rattler hater. As soon as he hit the Senior Bowl, I didn't like him anyway, and then I was out on him completely. The way that I look at it, you got Caleb Williams. He's the number 1 in the second tier. Like we said, we have Jaden Daniels, JJ McCarthy, and Drake May, not necessarily in that order. In the third tier, we have Bo Nix and Michael Penix, and it's basically been that way.
Yep.
I think that is the end of guys that are able to take over a team and be their starting quarterback next season. Then you start getting into Spencer Rattler and Jordan Travis. Those guys are going to take a little bit more time. In 2022, Pro Football Focus had Jordan Travis as the number 1 ranked quarterback in college football, according to their scoring, whatever. And then in 2023, like you said, he went undefeated until he got injured. He's a little bit small. He's a little bit old. But I think that, like another Jordan, Mr. Love from Green Bay, if Jordan Travis can find himself a situation where he can carry a clipboard for the next 3 years, he can enter the league like Jordan Travis. The way that football used to be, that's one of the things that the way that football has changed over the years, especially with the popularity of fantasy football, is everybody is looking for win now and the next big thing. Caleb Williams is the next big thing. Jane Daniels is going to be the win now guy. But gone are the days where Aaron Rodgers gets drafted and carries a clipboard behind a Hall of Famer for a couple years, and then Jordan Love does the same thing. If you have a situation where like Kansas City drafts Jordan Travis, sticks him behind Patrick Mahomes until maybe something happens, Patrick Mahomes moves on, Jordan Travis gets the Andy Reid tutelage, and then breaks out into the NFL in 3 or 4 years, he does have the skill set to be able to, and the rushing upside with 2,000 career rushing yards in NCAA. I like him better than Bo Nix and Spencer Rattler. I would put him right behind Penix as basically my quarterback 6, and maybe target him if he's still sitting around in the 4th round of a super flex rookie draft. I would take him and just kind of taxi squad him for the next few years. I like Jordan Travis so much. He's not going to win right away. He's not going to step in, especially, given his injury last season. He's not going to step in and take over a team this August and be a viable fantasy quarterback. But the benefit of that injury and the benefit of his size and the drawbacks and the fact that he's so far down on the quarterback rankings, just like Jordan Love was, is that he can kind of have that old school career. Look at Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield was the next big thing and was not ready. And unlike Johnny Manziel, he persevered. He didn't have the mental health and the substance abuse issues, so he was able to persevere. Zach Wilson, Sam Darnold, maybe those guys are in the same boat as Baker Mayfield. Give them a couple more years, and they come out of it ahead. Trey Lance is kind of in a similar situation. These guys can blossom at a certain point, just like quarterbacks used to. And my blueprint for all of this is Rich Gannon winning his first MVP at like 36 years old after a lifetime of being like a literal NFL quarterback backup career. Then he became the MVP for a couple years in a row. And were it not for a couple of balls bouncing the wrong way, could have created a dynasty, 3 Super Bowls in a row. So I kind of see that from Jordan Travis. He needs to get bigger. 6'1", I mean, that's rarefied air for success as a quarterback. But I like him a lot. All right. That does it for the 2024 rookie draft portion. We're going to snap back with the Undroppables Unveiled Devy Talk. What's up, everybody? Biggs from the Undroppables here to tell you a little bit about Underdog Fantasy. Now, the 2023 NFL season is over, but fantasy football season never stops. You can already draft for the 2024 season over on Underdog Fantasy. It's the easiest place to play fantasy football. The Big Board is a pre-NFL draft fantasy football contest with all of the incoming rookies in the players pool, all of them. You draft your team in 20 rounds, and that's it. You set it and forget it. There's no lineup management. In best ball, you get the optimal score to fill your starting lineup. It's a great way to get your dynasty startup draft fix without any league management whatsoever. It's only $10 to enter, and there's over $2 million in prizes that are up for grabs. How much of that $2 million do you want? Now go over to Underdog Fantasy and be sure to sign up with the code UNDROPPABLE. It's right down there. You'll get your first deposit matched up to $100. You put in $100 and you start with $200. Download the app today, get started, and I hope you win. Okay. Sorry about that. And we're back with Kraig Reuth. And Kraig Reuth is the creative director at RotoHeat.com. I appreciate you coming in. I want to give a shout out to Chalk. He's our fearless leader over at the Undroppables. Bradley Stalder, heading up Fantasy Football Plus, home of the Dynasty Pulse. Shout out Mike Lindbergh, Grindberg, aka at Fantasy or FF Canuck 99. I know your name, Mike. my partner in crime, partner in everything, Dukes and Travis over at the Undroppables, doing all the graphic content. You guys are awesome. You make everything work, and we appreciate you and all your hard work. All right, let's finish this up. This is part 3, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, go over to the Fantasy Burn. You can watch the whole video, this whole thing with Kraig and I. Go to the Dynasty Pulse over on Fantasy Football Plus on YouTube, and you can see the Dynasty Pulse show. And then over here on the Undroppables, you're already watching it already, or you're at the Fantasy Burn. Go over to the Undroppables, and this is our Undroppables, my Undroppables Devy content. We're here talking about quarterbacks. We'll make this super quick and get Kraig out of here. Basically, we're talking about the evolution of the quarterback position in NFL. The fact that everything is win now. You got guys who are being drafted in the top 5 who aren't ready to do it. Then they get crapped on because they're not ready to do it, so they don't do it. And then sometimes they can resurrect their careers. Sometimes they can completely fall off the map. It's not like it used to be where a guy gets drafted, holds a clipboard for 3 or 4 years, and then can recover or blossom as a viable guy. There's another trend, and that's affecting college football, and that's the NIL. So there's a specific quarterback that I have in mind that I love. He's been a target of mine for the last 3 years. Was the quarterback at the University of Arkansas. I'm talking about KJ Jefferson. Watching him in some games last year, he reminded me a lot of Anthony Richardson, just without the age and the arm talent. But watching that guy tuck the ball and absolutely truck linebackers down the field, the rushing upside was there for him to be a big dude in the rushing game in fantasy. And he didn't have the arm talent to be a first rounder. He transferred as a 5th-year senior to go spend his 6th year. Like, what are you doing? You're losing all of your upside at South Carolina. It's got to be an NIL thing. We see it at the running back position. Travion Henderson could have been the RB1 in this draft class. He goes back to Ohio State. Raheem Sanders from Arkansas, he was a top 5 running back until he got hurt last year. And then instead of kind of working his way back and entering the draft this year as a young declare, he's going back and continuing his career too. The contract situation in the NFL is a little bit different with running backs than it is for quarterbacks. The running backs are disincentivized from entering. But how do you see the quarterback position in college football? Are guys going to be staying for their 5th and 6th years unless they're just getting that Caleb Williams steam? Is that where we're going to see from now on?
Unless people are sure of themselves, 1, and then 2, their draft position, I think you are going to be seeing it. He's a great example of he's going to be making more, I'm guessing, off the NIL than he would as a rookie in the NFL where he would have been drafted. And for a lot of these guys, quarterbacks are always important. You're going to be having guys drafted late that are still going to be making teams in practice squads. So they're going to have opportunities to make a team down the road. They aren't losing that. Are they losing the potential high end on the back end? Of course, because age catches up with everyone. And even if you're Tom Brady, we learned. So he's having to make that sort of balancing act in his mind of what can I make now, college versus NFL, versus what do I think my realistic prospects are down the road. It's not to say I don't think he doesn't believe in himself, but everyone's situation is different in terms of their family life, what that money can mean for them now, what can mean for their family now. And then comparing that, I think that is a real conversation you're seeing in real time. People aren't talking it out necessarily in the public, but you're seeing the results of those conversations they're having with themselves and their choices that they're making. You're seeing a lot more quarterbacks and then just players in general making that choice. Because it always used to be, man, if you thought you were going to be drafted in the first 3 rounds or something, you just went because you wanted to get that money to secure it for yourselves. And it's a very different league now with that happening. And then for the NFL, we talked about with a lot of quarterbacks, this is one of those groups where a lot of these guys are older, and I think you're going to continue to see older guys come into the NFL, and teams are going to have to adapt to, all right, what does this mean for our team and our rookies? They might be more polished because they played more, but it's still a steep learning curve, even if you're going from Alabama to the NFL.
Right. Well, I do have an example that hits close to home. Aiden O'Connell was drafted last year in the 4th round by the Las Vegas Raiders. He was a 4th round pick, and he was 24. He had been at Purdue for a while, and he was fairly polished when he came into the league. He had a much, as far as the rookies were concerned, the rookies that played last year, he was second to CJ Stroud in DVOA and a whole bunch of metrics. He had the second best rookie season of the rookie class in 2023, which nobody saw coming. He was better than Will Levis. He was better than Bryce Young. He was better than everybody. He was older than all those guys as well. So in talking about NFL evolution of the quarterback position and the fact that it's guys get better as they age, might this be better for our dynasty quarterbacks if they're spending a longer period of time in college? Doesn't it kind of mimic that old school hold a clipboard for 3 years aspect of it? So you get a guy with like Bo Nix, who has so many thousands of reps now because he's been in the league for 6 years. Spencer Rattler, same thing. That's changing. So how does that affect Devy? Is it better to kind of ignore an Arch Manning in your Devy drafts and Devy trades? Is it better to go grab a KJ Jefferson who does have that experience? How does that affect what you're doing in Devy?
I think it really matters on the prospect that you're looking at. You know, if you have what you believe in, the word is thrown around too much, but I'm using it because that's what gets used, generational prospect, which some people called Arch Manning. I don't know that he was. You're not going to know for a while, but you know, he was the next big thing for quarterbacks in Devy for a while. They're coming out of high school. You didn't see a whole lot last year for a variety of reasons, and everyone's blowing up now because of the orange-white game that they just played this past weekend and how great he looked. If you're a firm believer that he's going to be the next thing and you can get him in Devy, go get him, because it'll probably matter quicker for your NFL squad if you're going to be right. But I think and it matters more for C2C leagues, I guess, but you know, if you're playing in one of those crazy leagues, you can hang on to some of these quarterbacks for longer, where it actually matters on that side of the ball for you more and gives them more opportunities to matter, where some of these guys that are going to be great in C2C for longer for you probably aren't going to do much of anything at the NFL level. But if you're talking pure Devy, you really do have to weigh whether or not you think this is going to be one of the next starting quarterbacks in the NFL, or if what you're seeing leads you to believe, all right, you know, it's not panning out like Keaton Slovis, for example. You know, it started off fantastic for him, and it's just gone downhill since. Probably someone you should have just moved off of, you know, if you didn't believe in him when you started seeing it, because at this point, you know, it's a sunk cost for you. You're stuck with whatever you have because he's probably not going to be an NFL starter.
Right. So I will say one thing about Arch Manning. I watched him in a game in high school, and he was being rushed from the blind side. He started moving to his left, and he threw a sidearm, off platform, off balance throw. While he's moving to his left, he threw the ball to his right and put it right on the tight end's hands, who was running a crossing pattern in the end zone. And the first thing I said, like, it was one of those moments where brain and mouth meet and without thought, and I just blurted out, Patrick Mahomes. It was the most Patrick Mahomes throw I've ever seen, and he was 16 years old. So mechanically, instinctively, he was the real deal, and all I wanted was for him to go to LSU. I wanted him to stay in state, and you know, with Uncle going to Dad going to Mississippi State, or Ole Miss, Uncle going to Ole Miss, and other uncle going to Tennessee. I thought staying in state and going to LSU would have been the perfect thing. He could have just gone straight to Baton Rouge and been the absolute like king of Louisiana. I was kind of disappointed when he went to Texas, and even more disappointed when Quinn Ewers decided to go back this year. I can't wait for the Arch Manning breakout. Obviously, he's a young kid. He's still a couple years away from figuring out what he's going to do. Anybody else that you're watching, Drew Aller, Jackson Dart, who are the guys that kind of people should be targeting in their startup drafts in Devy and C2C? Who gets you excited at the quarterback position in college this year?
I do like Quinn Ewers, and I think he's probably going to be one of, if not the top quarterback for the next year's draft. He's banking on going back and basically having slightly improved, but a repeat performance of the second half of the year. I mean, some of his statistics last year were just phenomenal in terms of, like I saw, and I don't remember where it was. He had I think it might have been PFF. He had like a 76% completion percentage, 6 touchdowns and no interceptions in fourth quarters last year. Like that's the sort of, when it matters stats.
In the SEC.
Texas became the first non-conference opponent to beat Alabama at home. I think it was in 16 years or something like that. That's the sort of stuff that really ends up mattering. And if you can build on it, set yourself up, not only for a Heisman, but set yourself up for the NFL level and being that number 1 overall pick or that high end pick. But another guy, just the way there's another name out there that isn't as big, Connor Wegman for Texas A&M. Yeah, I'm staying in Texas, but he was having a really nice year before he got hurt, and it ended up being out for the year with a foot injury. In like 3.5 games, he had almost 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, about a 69% completion percentage. And he was another guy that there was a lot of hype for, and because of injury, you just didn't get to see it. So he's a guy that I'm liking that you can probably still get later in drafts. And certainly if he starts building on that year that he started with last year, he's going to be another name that's right there if he decides to come out next year.
Okay. So, putting your prognostication cap on real quick, give me the top 3 2025 quarterbacks drafted. You have to sift through who's going to stay. Yeah. It's a 5th-year guy who's going to come out as a junior declare. You have to sift through all that. There's a 3-year window of possibilities, guys returning and stuff like that. But if you had to say today, who are the top 3 drafted quarterbacks in 2025?
Well, I got to put Quinn Ewers up there as my top guy, just from what I've seen out of him and been impressed with, and some of the other issues with some of these guys. I really don't want to put Drew Aller up there.
Right.
So I guess I won't. I'm still gonna go with him. Cade Klubnik. I think he showed enough, just a bad year last year in terms of resiliency and able to do stuff where if Clemson has any hope of continuing what they once were, they got to turn this around even more. And I think they're going to put him in a position to do it. He was another younger guy that had all the tools that came and supplanted a guy that still sticking around. DJU, I believe, is at Oregon State this year. He's somewhere still. You talk about guys that have been around forever. I'll put Cade up there, and then the third one, it's such a crapshoot because, like you mentioned earlier, I don't think this is a very good quarterback draft class. There's always going to be someone that'll surprise and this and that.
Right.
I think a guy that has a real shot to it, Jalen Milroe, with what we saw out of him, he's not in this draft, is he? I think he went back.
Yeah, he might come out in 2025 or 2026.
Well, I'm going to throw him in there because Alabama's
okay.
Still like a quarterback factory, and if they can get guys out of there that do great, they want to do that. And I think he's another guy that just showed a ton of progress last year for a guy that people had given up on, even earlier in that season, when they were playing a little bit of that quarterback roulette at Alabama in those early games. But he really showed out later on in the season for him, and I like the growth that he showed.
Do you see anything from Ugalele or Tungavaloa?
I mean, DJU was such a big name. He was a guy that I drafted early in Devy drafts way back after Trevor Lawrence. You knew when he was coming out, he was the next guy there. I don't think he's really going to be anything at the NFL level. He could end up being a backup, but he's not anything I'd ever count on as a starter. And same thing with Tua's brother, Taluya. I can never pronounce his name, but it's something like that. He just hasn't done what I'd want for someone playing at, Maryland.
Right.
The Big Ten isn't the SEC or something like that. And there should be more games where you're seeing more that you like out of him. So yeah, he probably gets drafted, but I don't, again, see anything long-term out of him as far as NFL being able to come in and be a starter.
All right. Now, I thank you for your time today. I know that it's lunchtime in Wisconsin, and I hate to be that guy, but I know the cheese curds are calling. Ha ha ha! Isn't that funny? All right. So I'm gonna get you out of here, but I want to get your thoughts on my big sleeper, the guy that I'm targeting in every trade that I make, every startup draft that I'm doing in Devy and C2C and NCAA leagues. Iowa State quarterback Rocco Becht. He's a sophomore. What do you think of him?
To be honest, I know very little out of him. I've seen his name, and I haven't really done a whole lot of quarterback deep diving into this year for these younger guys. And part of the reason is because of what you mentioned earlier, that there's so many of these guys that you start studying now, and then in 3 years, they're still going to be in college, and they've changed what they are in quarterbacks for better or worse. So when it comes to that more fantasy relevant time for NFL leagues, what you're looking at now isn't the same thing. And sadly, I'm not in any deep Devy leagues. My C2C league that I was in folded, and one of my other deeper Devy leagues folded. I'm in 2 Devy leagues now, which is fine. And they have IDP in them, which I love. But I haven't done that far into a lot of the younger quarterbacks.
Well, that is a fantastic answer. And the reason that answer is so fantastic is because everybody, including you, need to go to the Undroppables and go to the Unveiled. That is my Devy column where you can read who my top 10 targets are, who my top 10 fades are. Rocco Becht is my number 1 target. He came out, earned the starting job as a freshman, had a huge bowl game, 400 yards, something like that, 4 touchdowns. He had a freshman breakout at Iowa State, which produced Brock Purdy. Iowa State isn't a slouch. And Rocco Becht is a dude. He's a dude. So everybody go check out my Unveiled articles. Now that we're through the spring practices and the intra squad games and stuff like that, the Devy content is going to be coming fast and furious, and I'm going to be updating that column weekly. So everybody check that out. Thank you, Kraig Reuth. Let everybody know where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at RotoHeat Kraig. It's Kraig with a K because my parents had to make my life difficult, or unique if you ask them. But either way, that's how you spell that. And all my content right now is over at RotoHeat.com. Again, it's sort of a transition period for us, but we got rankings up over there. Articles are going to be coming out more frequently after the draft here. So you can find it all over there.
You have a kindred spirit in former New York Yankees third baseman Greg Nettles, whose parents spelled his name Graig.
No,
not Greg like everybody else.
I get Greg called Nettles. Greg all the time. So
he was very famous if you're an old. All right, everybody, thank you for watching the Undroppables. This is the unveiled portion of my episode of the series. We've got Chalk coming up doing wide receivers. Go back and watch the Noah Hills episode on running backs. Go back and watch the Andrew Cooper episode on tight ends, just to get yourself ready for the rookie drafts that are going to be starting up after the NFL draft on Thursday. And of course, go to the Undroppables YouTube page on Thursday night at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern to watch all of us at the Undroppables come in and out, get drunk, react to our teams and what their first round picks are going to be. Go over to the Fantasy Burn, watch this entire thing. Go to the Dynasty Pulse to see the Dynasty portion with Kraig Reuth. And of course, I hope you all win.